Thank you so very much, and indeed for the respect of time. I will try to be as brief as possible. Thank you, sir. First of all, hello to everyone. Bonjour à tous. It's a real pleasure for the International Trade Center to be here to discuss about this amazing opportunity that the AFCFTA represent for the continent, and many congratulations to the Cameroon National Shipper Council for this important initiative. We know the role that trade support institutions have, the important role they have into implementing and sensitizing the private sector on this important agreement. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their partnership. I will focus my intervention with the intention to address and focus my intervention on two main questions. First, how can vulnerable and unregistered SMEs and MSMEs, how can they move from informal cross-border trade to normal trade as part of the AFCFTA, and can a gender-based approach help in addressing ICBT? But before addressing how to address ICBT and the challenges faced by the business community in that endeavor, we obviously need to understand what drives informality and why this matters for AFCFTA. As you know, ICBT is a multi-phase phenomenon. It has economical, cultural, historical, political, gender, business perspectives. And it matters because in Cameroon, it represents more than 49% of traders, and in particular for traders, I've been able to look for that trade with Chad or with Equatorial Guinea. So this topic matters. And from a trade facilitation perspective, we have to look at what are the challenges that these traders face when they do trade. On the screen here, you have all the documents that needs to be submitted to do one export formalities in a given country. Here on the screen, you have other documents, not from the region, but as an example of that reality, on the screen, you have one of your fellow neighbors. How much and what does it take to do an export of a given priority commodity in that country? It requires interaction with 12 border agencies. It requires paying 24 different fees and charges, and it requires 30 steps, accumulating 41 documents to be submitted to diverse entities. So, as such, this level of complexity translates into time and, most importantly, costs that traders cannot afford to face when they do trade, and thus choose to trade informally. This level of complexity affects in a disproportionate way MSMEs, who are impacted the most by complex border requirements because they don't have the resources to dedicate to market intelligence. It has multiple consequences. First of all, MSME are not the priority clients of border agencies, and that they have to wait sometimes longer at the border. As I said just now, they lack the time, the labor, capital to navigate red tape, and tend to incur higher costs and spend more time in obtaining information because information is often not provided in a transparent way or have very much, let's say, contradictory information. Besides, often MSMEs and SMEs are often not able to benefit from some trade facilitation schemes that could facilitate their trade. Now, when we think further and we take into consideration the gender perspective, we even have to go higher into the level of challenges. Here, we talk about the fact that women have also to handle their business and at the same time to handle their household responsibilities, and they have limited time to spend on business and trade activities as such. It was already mentioned by previous speakers. They have limited inclusion into policy making due to both low representation and sometimes low level of literacy due to lack of access to education. Finally, they also are confronted to, let's say, realities that wouldn't disturb men, but will disturb women. The lack of gender-sensitive infrastructure. Let's say at the border, you don't have the way to take care of your kids, so you take care of him with you. He travels with you to the trade. But then at the border, there is no way to, let's say, change the diapers, talking very frankly. So all these challenges are further barriers that are impacting the ability to do trade. I was looking around on a few indicators for Cameroon, and when you think about a few elements here, only 3% of women own their household. 27% women represented in parliament. So obviously, when decisions are taken, the consideration of women's perspective are not necessarily taken into consideration. Thus, this leads to explain the disproportionate representation of women in informal cross-border trade. So we've seen it. The complexity, the time, the costs, all of these have driven most vulnerable traders to the only option available, which is to trade informally. But it affects, it keeps the economy in a suboptimal level, and AFCFTA constitutes a great opportunity to handle these challenges, provided that inclusive manner is undertaken to provide voices to this population. First of all, it does provide untaxed, unregulated informal activity that reduce the tax basis. It undermines the role of the states and prevent the creation of a culture of compliance and social cohesion. It can lead to unfair competition for formal businesses. It can also undermine the standards of formal businesses with law enforcement officials by precisely the inability to differentiate. Besides, it creates many other challenges, such as problem of harassment, risk of detection at the border, and many others. So once we have said that, we need to say also that as such, and as you probably know, it was mentioned by previous speaker, Trade facilitation can contribute to build bridges for unregistered traders in the context of the AFCFTA. As you probably know, one of the annexed of the Agreement on Trade on Goods of the AFCFTA, Annex 4, deals with trade facilitation specifically and retake most of the provisions of the trade facilitation agreement, which is the agreement on WTO level to handle trade facilitation. One of the main focus of the ATA, at least the highlight, right, is to eliminate tariffs, and thus eliminate one of the main reasons to do border control. Yet it doesn't eliminate a fully border control. Thus, the gain expected with tariff liberalization should be complemented with initiatives to address the high non-tariff barriers and trade facilitation bottlenecks that constrains trade in Africa to establish the one single market. This is why we need trade facilitation to build a conducive business environment that help vulnerable and unregistered SMEs and MSMEs, in particular women trader, to move from this system where it's too complex, it's too expensive to do trade. This trade facilitation can provide and reduce the cost of trade to help micro entrepreneurs to flourish and to become bigger. It can also provide tailored solution to survivalist trader to legalize the means of survivance. Meaning, we know that some traders don't have the ambition to do big business, but the tracasseries and the inability to comply with cross-border trade requirements, whereas they need to do trade to survive at the border, does create an irreconcilable sometimes situation, which trade facilitation can solve. Now, let's talk a bit more concrete. How we usually design intervention and how we suggest to design and implement TF reform within the context of the AFCFTA. Because, as we just said, the reduction of tariffs is good, but we need to go further with addressing non-tariff barrier and implementing trade facilitation measure. So what can we do together, and what guiding principles should we have here? First of all, reforms of trade facilitation and any reform are as good as they are implemented both in law, but also in practice. And as we talk about moving from negotiation to implementation, this is important in this context to advocate for focusing on MSME needs, ensuring that the implementation modalities of the agreements are made in an easy and accessible manner, in a user-friendly way, promote local implementation with local experts, and make it local not just in one language, but in all languages that requires to do trade. How can we concretely do this? Many solutions have already been discussed, and thus I will try to be as fast as possible. We can intervene at 3 different levels, both at regional and national and sub-regional level. First, at policymaking level, we can push for the establishment of simplified trade regime at specific border posts, support their operationalization, ensure that they fit the needs of the business community, leverage rational network to ensure that what is learned at one place can be reproduced somewhere else, and expand step by step the scope of simplified trade regime to address the needs of these particular populations. We can advocate to support soft infrastructure investment at the border. And here I would like to probably make a short reaction to the discussion on infrastructure. If the means and the financial means of big infrastructure are not here, simple, very simple infrastructure at the border can change and trickle down into multiple million of investment. By just establishing at one border, one stop shop, one border post, you can simplify drastically the life of these traders and thus develop economical empowerment. And as such, as part of the SCTA, build regional synergies based on the experience of your neighbors. Also, the implementation of trade information desks that are usually implemented by trade and investment support institution can, as such, provide a good framework to help those vulnerable population with soft infrastructure at the border and officers to provide them information on how to navigate cross-border trade, and specifically women, to provide them information about the mechanism of appeal and complaints, and make sure they know their right in relation to their trade. One element that I found very interesting here, in a study at the border of Kasumbalesa in Zambia, ITC, we have found that 78% of traders were not aware of a mechanism of complaint. And here, on that level, TISI have a strategical role to play to make sure that existing framework and existing complaint mechanisms, such as the one mentioned by previous speakers, are known and used by every population, making sure that this 99% of women that, 99% using this trade obstacle mechanism implemented by the FCFTA Secretariat can move to maybe a 90 and then an 80, and to make sure that women can use this tool. After talking about policymaking level, I will talk very briefly about institutional level action. Here, we can build stronger association to represent the interests of all traders, and cross-border trade associations and partnership within each other have a central role to play to participate in public-private dialogue for inclusive policymaking, to make sure that the business community, and in particular small-scale cross-border traders, those that trade informally, are heard by policymakers, because it's also in the interest of big traders. I think this has been discussed, so I will move on directly at the business level. I would like to conclude my presentation on a call for action to seize the opportunities and for real capacity building of all parts of the business community. And learning from, let's say, local institutions often leverage big opportunities, both for the institution and for the sustainable operation of training programs for themselves. And here I want to talk to you about several opportunities and several initiatives that ITC has implemented to build the capacity of TISI to provide by themselves trainings on cross-border trade formalities and implement cross-border management curriculum to build the capacity with local knowledge, to provide capacity to comply with trade border formalities, and thus embedded into a local institution all knowledge and ensure that there is sustainable training provided to the business community. Finally, the implementation of let's say, of a graduation program, let's call it this way, to assist and facilitate the move from informal cross-border traders to formal cross-border trade is absolutely central to ensure that traders can provide, can comply with procedural requirements, fees and charges at the border, so that they are accompanied into this process and can therefore comply by themselves, step by step, into this overly complex environment they have to handle. I think I will leave it there. I thank you for your attention, and of course, remain available for any question. Thank you very much for your attention.